Welcome to the Palm Springs Linguist YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the German language, and we're also going to be talking about a podcast, Learn German Through Music. And I have the host of that podcast as a guest. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Paisley. I'm the host of Learn German Through Music and the producer and the editor and the creator, the research
The whole staff.
department. Pretty much the whole staff. We've added consultants, native language consultants, who are kind of the permanent staff at this point. But yeah, so far it's just us.
Yeah, and it's a terrific podcast. I'm a music lover as well as a language learner. And so it's really, I find it very interesting, and it's a great format for learning German. And actually, I'm going to be a guest on one of the episodes, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be great.
yeah, so I'm going to ask you some questions about the German language.
Hmm.
We're going to share those with the audience, and then we're going to talk about some of the unique aspects of your podcast, Learn German Through Music. What is your podcast all about?
My podcast is basically about using music as a vehicle to not only help German learners learn new vocabulary, practice listening comprehension, but it's also an opportunity to teach the culture. And I think, most anybody who's sat in a German classroom has probably learned a whole bunch about World War II and a whole bunch about Lederhosen and not a heck of a lot else. And so what I try to do is kind of pick a song that will help me introduce like a German holiday or some aspect of German popular culture that people might not know about. And some examples of that are, I know this is going to blow some minds, but I chose, for example, a song that was based on Kung Fu films to teach about German Jiu-Jitsu, which is actually a thing.
I love it.
And then we also partnered with a movie review podcast to talk about the first sci-fi feature film ever made, which happened to be a German production. We talked about what Halloween looks like in Germany. We talked about how Black History Month looks in Germany. And so it's just an opportunity to, teach different aspects of the culture than maybe you get in a traditional classroom, along with, building vocabulary, listening comprehension, all that kind of stuff.
And I think it's really important that as you're learning the language, you're also learning the culture, because otherwise you could get to a point where you understand each individual word and you still don't know what they're talking about unless you can speak the culture as well.
Yeah, and that's something that I do tutor as well online. And that's something a conversation I've had with some of my students before is like, sometimes understanding a language is understanding the cultural the cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Realities of living in that culture, and then also just kind of the zeitgeist of that culture. It has a lot to do with the way people interpret things, and the way that language is formed, and the words we choose to use as verbs to describe certain actions. This is all very, very much based in culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this next question very much pertains to your podcast, and it's the reason why it really attracted my attention. How can music be a useful tool for learning another language?
Well, there's a couple of things. I kind of look at it as sort of a flashcard, a set of flashcards with about 30 vocabulary words, but it's not boring. If you look at it that way.
The interest level is really important.
Yeah. So I kind of handpick about 30 vocabulary words from each song that I teach. And so that's 30 vocabulary words that you should conceivably be able to learn and then really reinforce just by listening to the song like you would listen to any other song. Very important for listening comprehension. That's something that's difficult to do with textbook learning. It's difficult to do with, a lot of these online programs like Duolingo. You're not getting the listening comprehension aspect aspect of things.
Right.
Also, you can improve your pronunciation if you sing along. You can kind of work on your pronunciation singing along. And, just it's been proven even if you aren't teaching songs, if you're not necessarily learning a piece of music or trying to memorize the lyrics to a song, just having instrumental music playing in the background when you study aids in memorization. And I
Yeah.
think another thing that I really like about the use of songs in any language learning environment is that they're portable. So it's language learning that you can do on the go. You can listen. I listen to songs every day on the way to work. I have a pretty long commute, and that's a big part of how I get my language learning and practice in.
And I feel like, songs that you really connect with, you naturally start to like remember the lyrics to them. And so there's music really can be an aid in memory. And
Mhm.
so, there's a natural connection there with language. It totally makes sense. Excuse me. What aspects of learning German are easy for English speakers?
Well, a lot of people might argue with me on these, but I believe that pronunciation is probably the easiest thing for English speakers. For anybody in German, I think, because just German is one of the only easy aspects of German is that the pronunciation is extremely regular. And really, if you just spend one good class period going over the rules of pronunciation, you're really going to, not have a lot of problem with it ever. There are a lot of words that are similar to English because German and English share a root language. You'd probably remember the name of that better, than I would. The Proto-Germanic
Proto-Germanic,
language that,
yeah, I
yeah,
think that's exactly it.
is that the name of the language, Proto-Germanic, that both English and modern German and Dutch come from?
Right.
And along with the pronunciation being very regular, the spelling is very easy because if you know the rules for pronunciation, it's all based in the spelling. It's usually not very difficult. There's one unusual character and a couple of unusual accent marks, but aside from that, spelling and pronunciation are super easy. It's nothing like French or English, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, English is can be kind of a barrier for
Mhm,
people whose first language is not English to tackle
mhm,
the writing system is quite challenging. So yes,
mhm,
if you're a native English speaker, that is definitely going to help you with the German. So let's talk about the reverse. What
mhm.
aspects of learning German are challenging for English speakers?
Well, I'd say things like, well, the 3 gender articles, so a lot like Spanish and French, which a lot of people are familiar with, have 2 genders, masculine and feminine. Good old German has added a third, the neutral. So there's 3 gender articles that you have to memorize, and they change given the cases. So there's 4 cases, 3 gender articles, and not only do the gender articles change, and that's with the definite and indefinite articles like the and a and an, it's also with words like mine or my, with ours. Those all change depending on the case. The adjective endings change depending on the case. So the cases are also a little bit tricky. There's 2 different versions of the past tense. One is a written past tense, the preteritum, which is mostly, reserved for literature. And then there's the spoken past tense, das Perfekt, which both are formed completely differently. So you not only need to know when to use them, but how to use them. And then another thing that people find very challenging is the word order, because the word
Mhm.
order can be very different from English, and in some cases can almost entirely be reversed.
Yes.
So and still retain the meaning, and that's because of those cases. A good example that I like to use is "Der Hund mag den Ball." If you know the cases, you know that that means the dog likes the ball,
Uh-huh.
but you can also say "Den Ball mag der Hund," and even though to an English speaker's mind, that probably means that the ball likes the dog,
Uh-huh.
because of that Dane in there, anybody who speaks German knows that it's still the dog that likes the ball. we've just reversed the order of the words because we wanted to put the focus on the ball in that sentence.
And a very tiny amount of that still exists in English.
Mhm,
Um, case really basically just exists in pronouns in English.
mhm,
Like, say, I like you and you like me. I had to change I into me. Well,
mhm.
German, what you basically explained is German takes that and puts it on steroids and uses it for all sorts of things. Where we
That's a
use
way
it
to
in
put
this,
it, that's a way to put
yeah,
it.
we only in English we only use it in this like little narrow area of pronouns,
Mhm,
personal pronouns. And German uses it for a lot of different
mhm.
areas.
And
Oh,
I think who and whom, probably it applies to who and whom as well. That's
yeah,
also kind of an
absolutely.
example of that.
That is another example, although that's kind
Mhm,
of dying out. But yes, that absolutely fits into the topic.
mhm,
So let's talk about sounds of the language. What are some sounds
mhm.
that are in German but not in English?
Um, s I mean, technically, there really aren't any. Another language that I studied is Arabic, and so I'm thinking of some of the, pronunciation of Arabic letters that simply do not exist in any shape or form in English, so are very, very challenging for us to try to say. But, in German, there are sounds that are unusual and tricky for us to produce without practice, but
Uh-huh.
I would say not really anything that simply does not exist at all in English.
Okay. So
But some
things that are
exam
similar.
Yeah, yeah, there's some similar things, but they're definitely tricky ones, like, the letter Q in German is, kind of like a K and a V, spoken at the same time. So, for example, the word for jellyfish is kvala,
Uh-huh.
and it takes a lot of practice to say that kvala, or
Right,
the
because that's
word
a
for horse.
combination
Yeah.
of sounds. Like even though we have both of those sounds in
Hmm.
English, the k and the v, we don't put
Yeah.
them together. So
Exactly.
yeah, so the phonology of German allows for that, and the phonology of English does not allow for that. So I could see how that would
Hmm.
be tricky for an English speaker. Absolutely.
Definitely, or the ch sound, for example, which sometimes is just a soft sh sound, like the word for poem is Gedicht, but then the word for book is Buch, and you have to
Okay.
kind of do this thing in the back of your throat when you say it, and that's very challenging for us because those muscles just don't really get a workout. Um,
So would that be like the composer? I'm going to say it just
Bach,
untitled in English, Bach, but
yeah, Bach. It would
but in
be more
German,
like Bach.
I've heard that. I remember that being discussed in a linguistics class, and some English speakers will use that sound just when they say Bach. I don't do
Mhm,
that.
right.
But yeah, that's an interesting one. No,
Another is, the P and the F, like in Pferd. You have to kinda say the P and the F at the same time.
okay.
That's the word for horse, and then the other things I think are challenging are, like, the umlauts over the vowels.
Uh-huh.
Kind of trying to get used to those because it's almost like, 2 vowels pronounced at once in a
Okay.
way, and then the H is pretty tricky. I think the H is very tricky in German because sometimes it's one of the only letters that is kind of very irregular with pronunciation, so you get some cases where the H is silent. You get
Hmm.
some cases where you're inserting an H that isn't even written there.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and then it also tends to, after a vowel, draw out the length of the vowel. So you
Oh,
might
okay.
it's doesn't change the pronunciation of the vowel, but you kind of, draw it out and make it longer.
So the duration, it changes the
Mhm.
duration of the vowel.
Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
exactly.
Okay, let's talk about vocabulary a little bit.
Mhm,
German and English are related languages.
mhm,
They're in the same language family. And so some of the words are cognates. And
mhm,
cognates are two words, one in German and one in English, where they're very similar. to the
Mhm.
point that they're usually, not always, but usually recognizable to the speaker of the other language. So, what are
Right.
some examples of words that are cognates in German and English?
Mhm. Well, a couple of examples, like the word for coffee. In English, it's coffee. In German, it's Kaffee.
Very
And
similar.
it's, yeah, spelled a little differently, but pretty recognizable, you know. Fieber, fever is Fieber in German.
Uh huh.
Gray, the color gray, grau. Um, the word for knee brings in that lovely case.
Uh huh.
KN combination with a knee. So in English, knee is the K is silent. In German, the a K before an N is not silent. It's knee.
So, for
Um,
those of you that have always wondered why we have a K in the spelling in English, this is
mhm.
why.
Yeah, so we should be talking about our knees. um, let's see, negative and positive, pretty obvious, I think, what
Yeah,
those are. Yeah, there's hundreds of examples. Ozean for ocean. It's pretty much the word ocean, but instead of a C, there's a Z there. So yeah,
excellent.
lots and lots, and that does help learners.
Now, sometimes cognates can be false cognates, which means
Hmm.
that, or false friends, meaning that it's a word that's almost the same in both languages, except in this case, they actually have two completely different meanings. So, what are
Exactly.
some examples of some German and English false
Mm.
friends?
Well, I think one of the most well-known examples, gift. Do you know what gift means in English?
I
I
do.
mean, in German.
I do because I actually did a video about false friends.
Hmm.
It wasn't specifically about German, but I did include
Hmm.
a couple German examples, and this one's gold. Gift means poison.
Yes, yes. So you don't want to give a German friend a gift in English. You want to give them a gift in German because
Yeah,
otherwise you're not going to have your friend very long.
literally.
Literally. Another one I like, I'll see if you can guess some of these maybe.
Okay.
How about mist? The German word mist.
I know I've encountered that one before, but I don't think I remember it. Mist. Let me just guess. Mist.
Hmm.
Was it something to do with anger?
It's actually, kinda like manure. It
Oh,
it it
really?
basically means poop. It basically means poop, and I'm using the polite form there.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So, I've always wondered if, Sierra Mist just wouldn't hit right in Germany somehow.
Yeah, not
Like,
selling
does
well
not sound
there.
so refreshing when
It's
you're a
like
German speaker.
when I was a kid, there was a car, the Pinto Nova,
Mhm.
and if you speak Spanish, you know that "no means it doesn't go, which is not what you want out of a car.
No, but it's probably pretty accurate because I remember Pintos, and I don't think we see them so much anymore.
Yeah. Okay,
Um,
what's one or two more German English false friends?
so here's an interesting one. Billion. What do you think
Okay,
billion means?
okay, I'm gonna guess based on my knowledge of French and Spanish, because the word for thousand sounds a little bit like million. So I'm guessing that it's a different number.
Mhm.
So rather than billion, is it like a bigger number, like trillion, or is it not even a number at all?
It is a bigger number. So, milliard is how Germans say a billion, but billion is actually the German word for a trillion, which is
Oh, okay, I
extremely
guess right.
confusing because most of the other German numbers sound very, very similar to English. Hundert, thousand, but then when you have this milliard and billion, and yeah. So if you're
Yeah,
going into finance and learning German, you're gonna have to get used to that.
yeah, you better understand those false
Mhm,
friends, otherwise that could be a very costly mistake.
mhm.
Yeah.
And then let's try a verb. How about winken? Vinken. What do you
Incan.
think Vinken might mean?
Huh. So I'm assuming that the V sound is similar to the W sound, so it's kind of like wink. Am I on
Yeah,
the right track there?
yeah, the spelling is Winken. It looks to anybody who's not studied German like winken.
Yeah. Okay. So, hmm, what else could it mean if it doesn't mean to like blink your eyes? Um, maybe it means to like ignore somebody?
It means to wave.
To wave. Oh, okay.
Winken, winken.
Yeah, these are not intuitive at all.
Mm-mm. No, no.
Which is
And
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to throw in one more,
Okay.
kind of a last one. How about gymnasium?
Gymnasium. So it sounds like
Gymnasium. Mm,
so it sounds like gymnasium.
very much so. It's spelled like gymnasium, exactly.
Okay, but it means something different.
Hmm.
Gymnasium, like a gymnasium. What else could that mean?
Hmm.
Um, maybe another place that people go to regularly.
True.
So like
True.
maybe work.
Well, work, if you're very, very young, it's the preparation for work. It's grade school.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Prepares you not only to learn what you need to learn, but also to get used to showing up somewhere at a regular time every day.
So that kind of makes
Mhm,
sense because gymnasium is a place where you develop your physical skills.
mhm.
Well, it's just a broader meaning of that. A place where you develop your literacy skills as
Right,
well
right.
as numerical number, things like that. All
Mhm,
right. So, something that German is really famous for is its compound words. In fact, I even
mhm,
made a video about crazy compound words from all over the world, and
mhm.
a lot of them were from German. So, I was just wondering, what are some of your favorite German compound words? Because I think these are really fun.
Uh-huh. Are a lot of fun, although I might be a little disappointing here because I know like a lot of what people love about German compound words is that they're like 5 pages long just for one word. In most cases, most of the ones that I really love are much shorter, but they're
Okay.
very cute. And so, one example, Glühbirne. So, a Glühbirne literally means glowing pear. So, what do you think a Glühbirne is?
A glowing pear.
Yeah, what's a glowing
Oh
pear?
gosh, what would be something that would emit light
And
that would
looks like a
be
pear.
it looks like a pear. So could this be like a headlight or a
Or a
torch
light
or something?
bulb. A
A
light
light
bulb.
bulb.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that completely makes sense because a
Yeah.
light bulb traditionally is in the shape of a pear. I love that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I absolutely adore that as well. Another one that I really, really like, just because it's absolutely I want to like when I hear it, well, I first learned this word in the Berlin Zoo when I went and saw the enclosure, and I literally just wanted to reach out to a random person and pinch their cheeks and like, why is your language so cute? Uh, a meerkat is known as Erdmännchen, which literally translates to a little earth man.
Oh wow. Yeah, if you think about a meerkat when it stands up, it does kind of have some human qualities to it in its
Mhm.
proportions. I mean, when they're
Yeah.
standing.
Yeah, and they're I think they burrow in the ground as a matter of fact. So Erdmännchen, Erd is Erde from Erde meaning the earth or ground. So that's another one. This one's kind of hilarious just in the fact that it's very, very literal. Uh, it's not very pleasant word, Durchfall. So durch means through, and fallen is to fall. So what do you reckon a Durchfall is, or Durchfall is?
Like fall through something, like a
Mhm.
like a trap door.
A good guess, but it actually means diarrhea.
Oh, oh wow, that is a
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of gross, but kind of hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, I don't want that falling through. Yeah.
And I think one of my absolute favorites, Vokuhila, which is actually kind of an abbreviation, which means Vorne kurz hinten lang, which literally translates to uh, short in the front and long in the back. What do you reckon that means? A
Short
vok-
in the front and
yeah,
long in the back. Oh, is this
Vokuhila.
a mullet?
It is a mullet. Very good. Very good. Vorne kurz, hinten lang. Vokuhila.
Oh,
It's
that's
a
funny.
mullet.
You know, when you mentioned the word for
Mhm.
meerkat, that reminded me of one that I've learned. Although you're gonna have to help me with the pronunciation. What's the word for octopus?
Um, Gee, I
Like
know the word for squid is tentafish.
that's the
I
word I'm
think
looking
that's
for. Maybe
also
it was squid.
sometimes for octopus.
No,
Yeah.
maybe that's exactly the word that I was
Mhm.
looking for.
Tentafish and inkfish.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that, and it often makes me wonder. It's like, okay, little kids that are raised in the German language, you know, they automatically know something about this animal that English speaking kids have to be taught.
Mhm, mhm,
So I've
because
always
it's
found that
wrapped
one
into the name. Mhm,
right. I've always found that one to be really interesting. Okay,
mhm.
let's move on to the writing system. How does
Sure.
the writing system for German, how does it compare to the writing system for English?
It's very much the same. There's really only the umlaut, which is the one and only accent mark that German uses, and then the letter known as the eszett, which basically I believe translates just to SZ. But people may be familiar with it. It looks a bit like a lazy bee or a bee with a tail that doesn't quite, close at the end. That
Uh,
letter is basically a double S sound, a soft, like sound.
okay.
Hmm.
So just visually, there's a couple of things that are different.
Yeah, but
Um,
overall, not terribly, not
yeah,
terribly.
and my understanding too is that another difference is that in German you capitalize all the nouns, not just the proper nouns.
Correct, correct. All nouns everywhere are capitalized, and the longer you spend doing that in German, the more that's going to leak into your English.
Yeah.
I'm very guilty of that, unfortunately.
And it definitely makes me think like, okay, this is an advantage for elementary school teachers in that German kids being surrounded by this are automatically going to understand the parts of speech a little bit better
Mhm.
because you know it's going to be a lot more obvious what's a noun.
And German learners as well. I mean, automatically it's a noun. You don't have to wonder like, you know, is it a verb? Is it an adjective? You're like, this is definitely the noun. So that's,
Yes,
that definitely helps you figure out things from context to some extent, for sure.
absolutely. It's a good clue when you get
Mhm.
to a word that you don't know. At least you know it's a noun, so it kind of
Yeah.
narrows things down.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Or a name, but that I guess that is one thing I think sometimes if it's an unusual like two nouns next to each other, sometimes people will be like, is that a name or is it a word?"
Yeah.
It's like, no, no, it's words. It's words.
I remember that learning Spanish. That there were names that I was unfamiliar with, and
Mhm.
I assumed it was a word. And I'm racking my mind trying to figure out what this word means, and it's not a word at all. It's a name. Uh,
Mhm.
so it was
Yeah.
almost it was wasted energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the German language in general. What is often misunderstood about the German language?
This may be a matter of opinion, but I find a lot of people tend to say that German sounds very harsh, very hard. I couldn't disagree more. To me,
Yeah,
it's a very pretty language. It's very poetic sounding. And
absolutely.
it's certainly not all harsh consonants. There's plenty of softer sounding words. Schwaben, is one of my favorites, or Beruhen. That's another really soft-sounding Beruhen, so, which means to like touch something. And then another thing that I'm not sure exactly where this comes from. Maybe as somebody who's studied French, you may have some insight into it. But I've heard a lot of people say that English comes from French, and it's true that there's a lot of French that has come into English and influenced English, but it's a Germanic language, which I guess is something that I've had to remind people several times. No, German and English come from the same place.
Yeah, and just so people that may not know, so they have clarity, English is definitely a Germanic language, meaning that it's in the same family of languages as German. They're definitely closely related languages. And that this misnomer that it derives from French, well, there was a lot of vocabulary that came from French that's in English, but English is using English grammar, which is much more closely related to German than it is to French. So at times there may be sentences where you're using a lot of words that came from French, but you're using German grammar to a certain extent. I mean, it's, obviously it's evolved and changed from German, so it's not the same. So there's definitely connections to both languages, but ultimately it's closer related to German than it is French, for sure.
Yeah. And I think probably French had a lot to do with our exceptionally difficult spelling and pronunciation for non-native speakers. So.
Yes, English does have a very challenging writing system and spelling system. And you're absolutely right. French is a big part of that reason. A lot of the words that are spelled in kind of a crazy way because of French, French is pretty challenging in its spelling as well, but there's a little bit more logic in it when it's actually in French than when using the word in English.
Yeah, and there seems to be no good patterns to follow for English. It's just memorize it and deal with it.
Yeah, definitely a challenge in learning. Well, thank you so much. This is what a great overview of the German language. And if you're learning German, or even if you're not learning German, I find your podcast really fascinating. I love the music in it. I love getting exposed to the German music, getting exposed to another culture, learning some of the language. So tell us one more time, where can we find you? Where can we find your podcast? And I will leave in the description some links so that people can get to it quick, easily.
Well, because of the language we use, the music that we use, it is a Spotify exclusive because the podcast does actually use the original Spotify tracks. So when you are listening to it, you're also supporting the artist because they're getting their play count, going up. So we are on Spotify and socials, not as much on Twitter anymore, although I still do post to Twitter. Much more active on Threads at the moment. I have a Blue Sky account, although Blue Sky seems to, not quite be what Twitter or Threads is.
Okay.
And there is technically a YouTube channel just for video reviews, although I don't always update that as much as I should. So yeah, mostly on Spotify, and then find us on our socials. Mainly the most active at the moment are still Threads and Twitter. We do have a Facebook presence and an Instagram presence, but again, if you want the most activity, find me on Threads and Twitter.
Excellent. Check her out. It's a great podcast. And one of the episodes I'm in.
Yes. So I don't know whether this will come out first or after, but yes, it will. Right. If it's not out before you see this, it will be out very, very shortly.
Yes.
Before the end of the month. Okay,
very good. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.